How are you doing like around that whole thing about financial health and abundance? What does that feel like? As soon as I say those words, what happens? Does anybody have anything happening in their body? Does anything have a little tension that shows up in the stomach? Any kind of little, what's that all about? Or, no, that's not me. Or some version thereof. I don't think there's a single person in this room that hasn't had that experience at some point in their life around abundance. And I just want you to know, because this entire month is going to be about this stuff. Entire month talking about financial health and abundance and prosperity. So let's just get comfortable with it, because it's no different than talking about abundance in our relationships, abundance in our body, our physical body, our health, abundance anywhere else. It is exactly the same principle. And in some ways, it's one of the great things about money is that we actually get to see the physical manifestation. But it's not always truthful, because we're not always truthful. We're not always really looking with open eyes at what we actually have. We often end up doing interesting things like, I've got way more money than I think I do, so I can just go ahead and spend it all because I've got so much. Except really, that's called a credit card. It's not actually yours. It's actually a credit card. It actually belongs to somebody else. So we can do that kind of thing. I've got so much. But we can also do the opposite. I don't have anything. I've got nothing. And then we go into our cupboards and we see cans and cans of food that we actually haven't even eaten or looked at, maybe for a year. Seriously, I've got pasta in my cupboards, some types, and I know how long they've been there because it's not the stuff, it's not the linguine that I use. It's a weird shape, right? So it stands out from all the other pasta. And I know how long it's been sitting there. But somebody could say to me, well, you've got lots. And I think, no, I don't. Well, what about that pasta in your cupboard? How long have you had that? Have you used it? Are you recognizing that you've got it? Have you paid any attention to it? Have you honored it? You put money out, you paid for it. It's supposed to give back to you. And you've put it aside and ignored it. It looks like it's just pasta, but it's got an energy attached to it. We've got so much of that stuff going around in our lives that we often don't know what it is that we have, and then we have illusions about what it is that we don't have. There was a conversation I had a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago now, with a Haida couple. And I was up in Haida Gwaii, and I spent a few days with this couple who I met when I was there. I had no idea I was going to end up meeting them. And they talked to me about one of the ways that they deal with abundance. And they had a big family, and then they had the extended family that was attached to that. And if I was to put my, Vancouver white, non-Aboriginal eyes, blah, 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 on what I was seeing, I would say there's, some lack here. But there was so obviously no lack. And they demonstrated it instantaneously. Like there was no way I could look at it as anything other than abundance. So here's what happened. I showed up and they said, well, would you like to come for lunch? I've just met these people. Would you like to come for lunch? Oh, in my house. okay, I felt like, and I'd made a promise when I got there that I was only allowed to say yes to whatever showed up. That was my promise. So I was like, okay, I guess I have to say yes. And so I said yes. And they said, yeah, we're having a big salmon feast, a big salmon dinner. And we've got a whole bunch of other people showing up. So come and join us. So I joined them, and right in the middle of their living room, they'd put a huge, huge table. And I was just one of 10 people that were coming for lunch. And they had just finished catching salmon a few days prior, and they had canned salmon. And there it was for us to share. And so I thought, sorry, I'm really cold. So I thought, I enjoyed the meal, and it was fantastic. And then the next day I thought, well, I need to give back. And so I invited them to go out for lunch with me. And then they said, well, now we'd like you to come and do this with me. And then, so I said yes. And then I thought, well, I should probably, make sure that I pay that back. And so I said, well, maybe I'd like to see you tomorrow. What are you doing? Oh, well, we have a few people coming over tomorrow. Maybe you'd like to join us for lunch again. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Then I'm going to find some bagels, and I'll bring some bagels and cream cheese or something, and something else. I don't know, whatever else. And so I brought that over. And then there was more abundance. There was so much abundance. It was spinning. I could barely keep up with this circle of abundance that was happening. And so then we got into a conversation about what it means to share in the Haida community. And the fellow, he was working on carving out a canoe. And he'd been working on this project for quite some time. And he said while he was working on it, he didn't have a canoe to work with, right, or to use. And so he borrowed someone else's. And that was the culture. If you don't have it, you borrow it. You don't have to ask, because it belongs to all of us. It belongs to all of us. There's no division. There is only all. And so as something is available, it's there for everyone. And you mindfully use it. And when you finish, you mindfully return it. And you continue to be mindful in that circulation. You don't hold it. You don't hoard it. You don't keep the pasta in your cupboard for a year and not honor it. You pass it on to somebody else if you don't need it, right? So that the circulation of the energy keeps moving. This is what money is. It's an energy. And so if we stop it with our ideas of limitation, if we stop it with our ideas of lack, we're not moving that energy. It doesn't like that. It's one of those weird principles in life. It needs to keep moving. And so as we move it out, we find that it comes back in, which was what was happening to me as we were doing this exercise. And we didn't actually have a conversation like, let's do this exercise and see what happens. I just had a deal that I was just going to say yes, right? That's the only thing I signed up for. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to just keep seeing what happens when I just keep saying yes, and I'm going to be in a giving consciousness, and I'm going to say yes. Those are my only two things that I'm going to do. And that's what happened for 5 days straight. It didn't stop. It didn't matter who I saw, what conversation I was in, it kept going. In a completely different place, it's still on Haida Gwaii, because this is where the practice happened. I did exactly the same thing with not just the Haida people that I met, but also with the people that I was staying with. And so one day it was, well, let's go out. Do you want to come and go chanterelle mushroom picking with us, because it was the chanterelle season and they have tons of those mushrooms up there. And so I said yes. And this one woman, she knew where to find them. I'm thinking I'm going to go home with like a bag this big, right? No. We had a back of a trunk full for 6 people with boxes that were like this big of chanterelle mushrooms. I'm not kidding you. They were huge. They were so delicious. And then we ended up being invited to a beach party dinner. And that was all made with pasta and all of the chanterelles that had been picked. Nobody had actually spent really any money. And 20 people were fed. Does that sound like some kind of biblical story that you might have heard some time ago? Loaves and fishes, and how could that possibly happen? It's not possible. That doesn't make any sense. It's just a story. These aren't really stories. These are about how it actually works. If we hold on tight to things, we get the experience of limitation. As we recognize abundance that is already there, the mushrooms that are already there, they're waiting for us to pick them. That's all they're doing. That's what they're growing for. They are living for that. That spiritual energy is in that food for us. And we take it and we do what beautiful magic we can do because we've got hands and feet and all these wonderful body things that we have. And then we in turn create something for someone else. It's that whole circulation of how things work. And so this is how the mystic with the bills to pay gets to pay the bills. The mystic starts looking at what are the bills that really serve me. One of the other practices that I used when I first started to work with money and spirituality was I had a lot of resentment around the bills that I had to pay. It's like I didn't want them. I didn't like them. I thought they were unfair. And then somebody pointed out to me, now today's a funny example, but did you use your electricity last month? Did it heat your house? Did you use it? Well then, this is your opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for what I had. Let's be conscious. Did you use all of those things that were on your Visa bill? Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I used some of them. But there's some other ones. Not so sure that I used those. Not so sure. Maybe that was oops. Maybe that was me not circulating. Maybe that was me not being conscious. And so on the checks that I wrote, because this was still a period when people wrote checks to pay their bills, I started putting with love. Not to the people, yes, to the people that I truly love, but I started putting with love to BC Hydro. I started putting with love to BC Telus, right? I started putting with love to every single bill that I paid. And my energy got lighter around my bills. My energy got easier around my abundance. And I started to see what I already had more. I started to see the invisible of what I already had more. And I started to discern between what I thought I needed and what I really needed. And as that started to occur, my abundance started to increase. It's fascinating. So here's a little quote from Ernest Holmes. Money, being a neutral thing, has no preferences. It does not like one person more than another. It will flow toward the one who attracts it by holding a single mind toward it, who welcomes it, expects it, because that's another one. I'm not worthy of money. Oh, good. So how's that working for you? Gee, it's not showing up. Because I'm not worthy of it. Start being worthy of it. Start thinking about those who have and start thinking, that's interesting. There are some who have, and in other parts of their lives, they clearly don't have, right? But then there are some who have, who really are quite gifted in that area. You might want to just see how they do that. How do they do that? Learn from how different people do that. If we have resentment around those who have, we're creating that separation once again, right? That person has it. I don't have it. I don't like people who are rich because they have it and I don't. I'm not sure that that's a good message to send a universe that wants to give you abundance. We need to know that we're worthy of that abundance. And this is where he says, so the one who attracts it by holding a single mind toward it, who welcomes it, expects it, and knows that he is or she is its master. So we are the ones that are in control of that. The flow is already there. It's us, for us to figure out and accept how we want that flow to show up in our lives. So here's another one, and I like this one a lot. Realize that behind everything that is seen is the silent cause. In your life, you are that cause. So that's the point of power is within us. And then the last thing that I just want to talk about just in terms of this is something around everything that happens twice. So everything happens twice, once in our mind and then in our outer experience. So we begin by figuring out, I'm choosing to be abundant. We don't wait for the abundance to show up. When I was at Haida Gwaii, I said, I'm going to say yes first. I didn't know what was going to show up, right? That wasn't my job. My job was to open my mind to the idea of possibility. Spirit's job is to fill that with what it needs to fill it with. So it's not my job to figure out how. It's just my job to be open. So that's the first thing. And as soon as we do that, then we get to have the outer experience of it. So it starts in mind and it starts out invisible. It starts out like everything in mind as an invisible construct. And then it becomes manifest. So that's the way that whole cycle, that whole thing starts to work. And so one of the things that we have that happens to us sometimes, and you may find this in your circle of people that you've come to know over the years, is that there will be people in your life who will want to pass down their knowledge to you. This starts quite usually sometime around when we're in our 20s. And someone will say to you, this was my favorite one when I was in university, it was like, oh yeah, but wait until you get into the real world. I don't think people say that so much anymore, but they used to say that. And my thought always was, aren't I in the real world now? I mean, I thought I was. This is just a different version, right? Or they'll say, you wait until you have kids, or you wait until this happens, or you wait until that happens, and you'll see how things really are. Well, that's sort of like planting a seed of fatalism into you. If you buy into what that is, you just wait until you get married, you'll find out how tough it is, right? What do you think's going to happen? You'll get married and you'll find out how tough it is. You wait until you have kids and you'll see it's horrible, right? You probably get to have that experience too. You don't want to take on other people's ideas of what you want to live from in your life. We are ultimately completely responsible for how we want to live our life. I'm not saying we get everything that we want, because sometimes things take longer. But ultimately, we are at choice about what those ideas are. If we have an experience where we say, yes, that was really difficult, do we want to keep it being difficult? We can get a new idea about that. Let's try and see what that new idea looks like. But we don't want to take on and have the experience of passing down or inheriting someone else's false idea. Cultures do this all the time. Entire cultures, entire communities will buy into an idea that this is just the way it is. We've seen that All over the world that happens. It's nothing special. But there's always a few people, right, that'll say, yeah, I don't think so. So you've got, 5 generations of people who have never been to university, never had a post-secondary education. And that's just the way it is. We're just not smart enough. We just don't have enough money to go. We blah, 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 blah. And then one person says, you know what? I don't think so. And lo and behold, if they're not the one that finds that they can work so hard that they found 10 bursaries to help pay their costs. And lo and behold, they've got the university degree. I saw that happen all the time when I was working at Okanagan College. They would come from families that were challenged and difficult, that had a mindset that said, we can't do this. And then you'd go to the grad ceremony because there was that one kid who had decided, you know what, that's not true anymore. I don't buy it. And you had those incredible parents in absolute tears because it was the first one that had said, no more. I'm doing it differently. What had changed mostly was a construct around what was possible. And that is exactly the same thing that happens to us with money. As we get clear about our own value, we get to increase and expand the value that we have. Tangible value in our hands. We get to experience that. And so that's what we're aiming for. So this is going to be lots and lots of financial work for us. It's going to be good work. And if you pay attention, it would be interesting as a little bit of homework. I don't give homework very often, but I think this month might be a good month for homework, is to put down in a journal somewhere this week how you feel about money, where you feel like it's not showing up and you would like to have it show up, and start working on what you really want. Because that's another thing we do. We say we want something, and then we put our energy over here. And we wonder why we didn't get what we said we wanted. Start making it so that it's all in alignment. Write it down so you've got it. If you want to put your bank account down, now and see where it is, or if you want to see how much food you have in your cupboard from the beginning of the month versus the end. Some people have done things like, I'm not going to spend any money on groceries now that I've looked at my cupboards. Wow, I just saved $500 and all I'm doing is eating the food that's already in my house that I haven't recognized. That's an interesting idea. How much food do you throw away? That's always another interesting idea. That's just like throwing money away. It's another good one. There's so many ways. So I challenge you to just write down whatever it is you're working on with your financial health and your abundance, just as a measuring stick, because you're going to come back to it at the end of the month and see if you've made some progress. It may not show up yet, but there will be progress if you work it, if you pay attention and you have a look at it. And I'm only closing my arms like this. I know that's not the nice thing to do, but frankly, I'm freezing. So I'm doing my best to be open, but I'm so cold. So thank you. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I know you are absolutely full of abundance, each and every one of you. I know that you've got more abundance than you can possibly imagine, and more is coming your way. It's already coming. Because if you pay attention to it, it grows. End of story. Namaste.